Hey guys, welcome back to InventBox. In this Blender tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create this scene right here. One of the coolest things about this scene is the way that the cloth actually drapes over the table. So let's get started. Go ahead and open up a brand new file. Now we have our start cube, and in this case we're actually going to keep it. Go into edit mode and bring the top face down and extend the edges a little bit to the shape where it's about the same as the top of a table. I'm going to thin the table down a little bit as well. Alright, now let's select the bottom face and do Control B to add a chamfer on the bottom. And then same thing on the top, Control B. And I'm just going to break the edge a little bit with a radius. And how I did that was whenever you do Control B and you drag out, you can see it's just doing a flat chamfer. But if I move the scroll wheel up, it adds more and more corners the more I do that. So that's what I did, except we don't want it to be too big or noticeable. Now let's go back into object mode by hitting tab. We're going to type set origin. You don't even have to finish it. And once you do that, you'll hit spacebar while your part is selected. Type set origin. Click on that, and then I'm going to do origin to center of mass, and then in parentheses volume. So now my cursor is in the center of the object. That's not necessary, it just makes it easier to move around. Now let's add the table legs. So let's go into orthographic view by hitting 5 on the numpad, and then hit 1 to go into side view. And you can also change that down here in view, and then you can do the left side, right side, front, back, bottom, but it's a lot easier if you just use the keys on the numpad. So now we're on side view here. Let's create a cube, and with this cube it needs to get much thinner, just like that, and take the back just like that. In this case, about right there. Now back into object mode, pick that, put it right there, bring it down, and we'll want to center it right there. So bring it this way, put it right on that corner. It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it looks okay. And we'll do the same thing, we'll set origin, just so it's easier to control. Now we're going to move into view right here, copy it, Shift D, and move it to the other side. Just like that. Now they're both in the same spot, and if you want, you can use the grid behind it. So this is 1 square away from the edge here, and same with this, 1 square away from the edge here, as long as the top of your table is lined up with the center line going right through it. Now these legs I'm going to angle a little bit, so I'm going to hit rotate along the y-axis, and we're going to rotate them 10 degrees, and do that with the other leg. Rotate Y, but this time we're going to hit negative 10 degrees, so it'll go the opposite direction. Now move that back to the same spot, right there and right there. Now I'm going to copy this, Shift D, click and move it over. And I'm going to rotate it negative 10 degrees again to straighten it out, and then rotate it still on the y-axis 90. So then this will be our bottom piece. And then I'll center it right there, just the best that I can. Like that, there we go. Now move it down to the height of the table that you want, right about there. So now these are all perfectly lined up since we stayed in that view. I'm going to go into edit mode take the bottom of this and bring it up right in there, just so it's barely hidden. You won't see it whenever we go back into object mode. Now select the other one and do the same thing. Just make sure they're at the same place or else the angles won't match. So right there is where I want it. Now, you might be saying, well, this thing sticks out a little bit too much. We'll take care of that now. We can go into edit mode. And in order to get these both the same on both sides, I'm going to take it right to this line on the grid. And that's why we wanted to center this piece on that center blue line. And then do the same thing over here. Move it to the same mark. Right there. Alright, and that still looks just a little bit odd. So I think to make it look better, we're going to go to Edge Select. Select both of these edges, Control B, and give them a chamfer, just like that. And I think that makes it look much, much better. Now you can add something in between here. I'm kind of liking actually just kind of the emptiness and the simplicity of it. It's not actually, probably not structural, but it'll work. This is the 3D design. So copy this, go into the side view, and drag this right there. Doesn't have to be perfectly the same. So that's good enough, and now we have just kind of a simple table. Now let's add the floor underneath it. So I'm going to put a plane right there, and that'll be our floor. Make it bigger. About right there. That's good. Now we're ready to make the tablecloth that will drape over it. So to do that, I'm going to create another plane, bring it up, and center it over the table. Scale it up a bit. I want it to be draping across the sides and kind of scraping on the floor. So that should be good right there. Now, let's add a material to it just to give it color. I'm going to make it blue, just like that. Now, let's go into edit mode, go to tools, and hit subdivide under the add drop down. And then change the number of cuts to 65. And this will actually kind of give it the look of fabric. And you can see these squares are actually a little bit big. So I'm going to bump this up to 100. Not 10. Just add another 0 in there. Just like that. Now that's a good amount of squares in there. So now let's go back into object mode. And now let's add our modifiers. Click on Add Modifier, Cloth, and make sure to do these in the same order. Add Modifier, Solidify, and we're going to keep it at 0.01 thickness. Add Modifier, Subdivision Surface. Now we have all those modifiers. We're going to go ahead and select the tabletop right there and go over to Physics. We'll drag this out just a little bit. The Physics tab, click on Collision, and then same with the table legs. And this is going to make it so whenever the tablecloth falls, it will actually be able to interact with the table and its legs. So it'll make it look a lot more realistic. The tablecloth won't float through them. And now that we have all those set, also set the floor to collision. Select the plane here, your tablecloth, and under cloth collision, that should be checked. But one more thing, go down into the drop down and click on self collision. So now it will collide with itself and kind of add in those wrinkles and make it look more realistic. Now we can go ahead and play the animation just to kind of see what it'll look like. You can see it start to drop down on the table, form around it, and now start to kind of pull in and, as you see, drag across the floor. And I just think this is the coolest part of doing all this work. And then right as you play the animation, you can see the final result. Actually, not the final result. It looks even cooler whenever you render it. But you can just get an idea of what it'll look like. We'll pause it there because that looks pretty cool. It's almost like a water effect. It's amazing that it can render it just like that. So now we have that set. We can go ahead and add our colors and materials to everything. Control Z to bring that back up. Top of the table doesn't matter too much because you won't see it, but the legs I would recommend giving colors. So I'm going to color this a black. If we go into the render viewport, you can kind of see that that's the color it's going to be, which I think is a little dark. So I'm going to bring up the color a little bit and do that to the rest of these. Alright, now I have all the legs colored, and next we're going to color the floor here. I'm just going to make it just a little bit of like a browner color so you'll notice it a little bit more. Now let's go ahead and light our scene. Now my favorite way of lighting scenes is with plane lighting. It gives a really even light source. So I'm going to create a new plane, and this will be our light source. So bring it here in the center, scale it up, real big, rotate it 45 degrees, all right there. And then we'll take it away just a little bit, just like that. Copy it, rotate it, put one more right here just to get even lighting. And then I'm actually gonna copy both those and rotate them. And now we're sure to get very even lighting. Kind of like a light box. Now we have our scene lit. Let's see where our camera is. If you hit 0 on the numpad, it'll take you to your camera. Now you're saying, wow, now my light sources are covering the camera. Well, now we'll get to that. To turn the planes into light sources, select the plane, new material, and in order for this to work, you have to be in cycles render. Surface, emission, and then do that to all of the planes. Once we have all of these given an emission, just like we have now, we're going to go into their material settings, and then in cycle settings, uncheck the camera box. And what this does is it makes it invisible to the camera, but it's still going to be producing its light. So if we go into the camera now and go into rendered view, you can see that they all disappear. But if we go back into solid view, they're all back there, but they're producing their own light. So now we can go ahead and delete this point light in here. And if you aren't able to get inside of the light box, it's probably because you are in orthographic view. And you can tell up here in the corner where it says ortho, which stands for orthographic. So hit 5 on the numpad to go back into perspective. So now in here, you can see there's the point light, and we don't need that. So I'm going to delete it. Now let's take a look at where our camera is, and we're probably going to want to move it. So I'm going to go to rendered view and look at the camera. So now let's play the animation, and it'll take quite a lot longer in rendered view. So go back into solid. Now we'll let it play. Wait till it gets to about right there. It doesn't have to be the exact spot where you want it to be. Go back into the camera and go back to rendered view. You can see our camera is not quite totally centered. So to fix that, what we're going to do is bring it down a little bit. So now let's take the camera, bring it over, down, back, just like that. Now you can see it's just about where we want it, say right there. And now let's make the bottom plane a little bigger. Just like that. Now let's go ahead and do our final scene. So find a place where you like how it looks. So go ahead and play the animation again. And then find a spot where you like how the fabric just kind of twists and turns and you think would make the render look the best. So I think right about there. I like it there. So now in our camera you can see we like how the scene looks. We know it's well lit. Now we can go ahead and hit F12 and then that'll render it. And in your render settings, which is the little camera icon, you can see we're rendering in 1080p, which is pretty high resolution. So now it'll render, and we'll see how it looks. This is just kind of a pretty quick render here. And you can start to see it materialize. It's kind of exciting. And you can see how that's looking, and you can see right here the corner is peeking through a little bit on the fabric. And what I'm going to do is make the fabric a little bit thicker to fix that, and I think that'll help. So you can see we also need to move it up just a tad, so I'll fix those and then I'll get back to you. Alright, I just took care of those little tweaks we had to make, and now you can see how much better it looks. But some of the detail on the fabric isn't quite crisp enough. So to fix that, I'm going to take the cloth back up by going to frame 1 again, and go to materials, and instead of diffuse BSDF, we're going to change it to glossy and make the roughness full, which is 1. And then now that'll give us just some of the extra kind of figure that we needed in the carpet. Not carpet. I guess it could be carpet, but it's the tablecloth. So right there is good. Let's back it off just a little bit. You can adjust it with these arrows here. Look it right there. And once it's kind of actually buffered through the scene, you can take it back to frame 1 and play it, and it'll go pretty fast, which is pretty cool. So right there is where I want it. Now let's go ahead and render it, and it'll go pretty fast. And just a tip, if you're using a graphics card, don't set it this small. Graphics cards work a lot better in big areas. So since we're rendering in 1080p, I'm going to go down here to post-processing, performance, and then under Hilbert Spiral, change this to something really big but still square. So I'll do 2048. So that's pretty big. Now that we have that, if we render it again, you can see the graphics card is rendering it all in one frame. And then to change to your graphics card, there's these two options under device. You have GPU compute and CPU. If you have a graphics card, you want to use the GPU. If you have the CPU, which most computers probably have unless you have a graphics card in your computer, select CPU. So now it's rendered, and this is what your final image looks like. You can change your resolution to higher resolutions, but I like how this looks. Now you can go ahead and click on Image, Save as Image, and then save it wherever you want it, and use it for whatever you need. So hope you guys found this video useful, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.